Thanks very much for all three speakers. I'm going to make some comparative comments and draw out some questions. In fact, the last paper already answered some of the questions that I was going to pose, but I will transform them into questions again for the purposes of a conversation between the three speakers. So, I'm going to pose some more general questions, and this is to the conference as a whole. What sorts of archetypes of division are we going by? So, I'm just wondering whether the archetype is a very interesting sort of concept. It also refers to a subconscious of division, which might be re-emerging at each and every time, which might even be what we could call an archaeological or ancient type of imaginary that keeps reappearing. Now, we can pose this question in various ways. One, how are such archetypes of division being reproduced in actual conflicts? Now, in parallel to that, how are such archetypes of division reproduced in academic representations of conflict? And then we can pose the question by asking, how are such archetypes of division circulating as materialities and ideologies, which you were referring to in your paper? Now, my main question is really, for purposes of conceptualizing out of the particularities of the various historical papers which were presented here, is really how do we conceptualize division? So, division as a concept, as an imagination, as an imaginary. Not to take it for granted as a ground for comparison, but to also conceptualize what we might mean by comparison. When we use the term divided societies or flag, the notion of division for a conference such as this one, how do we conceptualize between the kinds of empirical material that is presented to us through historiographic studies or anthropological ones, let us say? So, for example, I'm thinking about where do we draw our comparisons from the micro to the macro. We can think of conflict between the genders, for example, as another archetype for, we might say division, we might call it conflict, we might call it rivalry, another term that was used in one of the papers. Conflict in families, conflict between countries, conflict between ethnic groups. Now, I'm just trying to invite us all not to use these notions of division, of conflict, of rivalry as quick terms, but to think more deeply about the kinds of connotations that these might carry, which might actually be indeed archaeological or ancient ones, which need to be somehow dwelled into in order for us to better analyze what we might mean by these terms when we use them. Just so that we move away from using such terms as shorthands, divided society. I mean, as if we all know what that might mean. We don't actually. So, again, to move on from this discussion, move onwards, in a sense, how do we conceptualize division? Where do we see it? What are its circulating representations? And what is our imaginary for division? So, if in certain kinds of political science literature or international relations literature, a lot of these mistakes are also done in my own field in anthropology. I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other in any sense. If division is represented in contrast to unity, or conflict versus reconciliation, these sorts of conceptualizations should not be mapped, I think, onto difference versus sameness. In a sense, we're not trying to achieve a certain kind of sameness between communities when we are trying to reconcile them or build peace. The differences will be there. The thing is to work through these differences, not to neutralize them, not to produce any kind of sameness, in a sense. Which leads me on to also, in parallel to this whole conversation as to how we might conceptualize division, to the question of how we might conceptualize peace, how we might conceptualize settlement, how we might conceptualize reconciliation. Because in all of these instances of historical conflicts that are being presented in this conference, there are not only circulating archetypes or imaginaries for division, but also for peace and reconciliation, which are as complicated as the imaginaries for division. So, in a sense, again, in parallel to my questions about the concept of division, I would like to ask similar questions about the imaginaries for peace that are circulating, both as a materiality, as an ideology, through international organizations, through states, as well as through social actors. And I don't in any way take a naive approach to the notion of peace, but just as a final sort of comment, to ask what a nuanced approach to mediation might require, to see how certain archetypes of division might be reproducing themselves in models of peace that are represented for reconciliation between different communities. I will stop there and we can continue the discussion. So, would you like to comment just with some of these questions, or should I open it to the floor? Let's open it to the floor for questions.
Well, I can hear you, but not through the mic. Maybe people have difficulties in the back.
Christine, you could come here and just pose the question.
I find very interesting this your description of division, divided societies through conflict, open conflict like race case, and the oppressed conflict that is hegemony. So I'd like to ask your comment on the historicity of hegemony as a strategy in favor of consensus and the resistance, the other side. Because, okay, there is an hegemony there in your country, but there is also a resistance that brings the dialogue, the failed dialogue. Is it clear? No? No.
Is this a question to me?
Yes.
That's one of your techniques, I don't know. You didn't mention that one.
Denial.
May I say in other words, or you need to...
You are referring to Germany in relation to what?
Not Germany.
Oh, then I'm not simply getting the question. Sorry.
Okay. You described the pillarization in Poland as a consensus, an hegemony, a consensus through hegemony.
A content through
Hegemony.
Okay, sorry.
So, please comment the historicity of hegemony and the resistance also. This is, I made another question to Stefan. you talk about the historical genealogy of the German representations. Okay. Please, one word on the role of the German plays now actually regarding the last economic crisis.
The German place?
Regarding the last economic crisis.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Will it work? Or we need? Oh, I don't know.
Do we want to collect further?
Why don't you answer this? I think you're
Yes, thank you for your question. I was playing with this example of pillarization in order to complicate the picture of divided societies and to bring forward the idea that these divisions are always complex, and that although in the Dutch case the divisions have been more or less represented as I described as polarization. Nevertheless, the Dutch society and history have been emphasized as being a consensual society. So, and I brought forward this example because I had the suspicion that because the notion of divided society was not being problematized at all in the concept of the conference. I'm not criticizing the organizers, but simply telling you how I read it. I thought it would be good to emphasize that divisions and consensual politics can go together, like in the Dutch case, and or how we need to complicate this picture of consensus in terms of hegemony. That was my concern, and I did that because I sensed a bit that the notion of divided societies had a kind of negative connotation. Divisions are problems, and we should actually strive for something else. Or maybe this is my particular reading, but through the Dutch example, I tried to actually present a case where there was a divided society, a divided society, which pretends at least to be a consensual society. This picture is because you asked this question, what about the historicity? This picture was the dominant picture for pretty long. I mean, this whole notion of polarization was developed in the 30s, but became only part of dominant discourse since the 50s, and then it went down because the pillars went down, and then we got this other model. So I mean, you can basically say that in this sense, this notion of how hegemony works, the form of hegemony, you can say, there's a clear historical historicity to it. I don't know whether that answers your question, but.
Yes, but now we'll take a few questions and then please.
The Dutch example, we mentioned the Gouda cheese and the branding of the cheese, maybe the possibility of the Dutch branding themselves as for themselves and for the world as liberal, tolerant, and consensual, non-consensual, or consensual. Do you think also helps the Dutch society to construct itself indeed in the layer of as persons, as individuals, as such, or do you think it is actually doing the counter effect? As a society, they pretend, as you just mentioned, but under the surface, as individuals, it is the other way around. It is creating a suppressed violence, or yeah, maybe it's already clear.
Well, short answer is that you have all kinds of Dutch individuals, and I cannot generalize. I mentioned it. I compared it to Gouda cheese and Bult, because in the 90s, late 80s, in the 90s, the Dutch political class or the Dutch governments were pretty self-confident because of this consensus politics. I mean, basically, the recipe for the polder morale was that the trade unions agreed with the employers that they would limit their demands, their financial demands, in a trade-off for more free time, etc., in order to improve the Dutch export position. That was so. Actually, it was a trick that was repeated by Schröder, by Germany under Schröder, which also came down to cutting down labor costs and then still moving ahead or making progress by a better export position. I did not tell you anything about the end of the polder model, or not the end of the polder model because it's still there, but the cracks of the polder model, which actually came in the early 2000s with the murders on Theo van Gogh and Pim Fortuyn and right-wing populism also becoming a very new element in Dutch politics. But the populist party was a threat to the existing system for a couple of years, but it's now more or less neutralized. So again, I mean, it's again, the main picture is that of more or less harmony, or more harmony than in other parts of Europe. And but the export, I did not hear any Dutch politician over the last years argue that the Germans or the Brits or whoever, or the French, for that matter, should look at the Dutch case as an example.
Okay, there are two questions. We'll take that and this, and yours, actually three.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was a great panel. So thanks to everyone. I have just a question for Stefan. How come, I know, I mean, you could not be exhaustive, I guess, but I was wondering why you didn't put in the genealogy the 1960s Auschwitz trials and the 1990s discovery about the crimes of the regular army in the Second World War. And for Mitsos, I love the paper. I was wondering about the fact that the original phrase of Angelopoulos was not which adds to the ambiguity. So it's an already problematic script. It's already a script that has been altered, that was multiplied and diffused. So I was wondering if you could say something about that.
Yeah, I also have a question on virality. I also like the paper very much, but maybe I didn't in the end understand what is now the potency of virality. I mean, in terms of, for example, let's use classic terminology. Althusser, is it ideological appellation? Are subjectivities formed still, or does it just mean nothing? Also, virality, I mean, viral things are competing with other viral things. There's a certain temporality, which is often very short. There's the competition with dancing dogs and cute babies. That's very harsh competition. And my question is also, again, is this new? Of course, there are certainly some new things about digital media. But my question is, for example, was this not already prepared in, let's say, printed media, the moment when they are not political anymore and need to also address an audience that can be of all kinds of political colors, let's say, and that is the phenomenology not of virality, but of scandal and scandalousness. Typical about scandals is also that those who are scandalized remain outside of the picture. And that's the reason why it spreads so well. And I have to say that in media, I mean, media events are most of the times nowadays scandals. People be, you know, this is scandalous. And then, I mean, it's not always only that, but it's a very easy way. Let's say as the most popular media, which are glossy magazines, that's all scandal. That's all scandal, and the reason is that you don't need to take a stance. You don't need to divide. The scandalized is never in the picture, and it's just why that this is scandalous is never explained. Actually, that remains that's just cultural conventions. So, what is the difference between scandals, also multiplying very easily, and being taken over from one paper to another, or from glossy magazines to serious papers, who then have news to report about the fact that this scandal has become scandalous in its proportions? You know, so this. So is that a different phenomenology of virality or scandalousness?
Actually, I have some answers and questions as well. I think Navarro actually asked about like how can we conceptualize the vision or the borders. I think like generally politicians are everybody knows borders as a kind of line on the map. But yeah, I think actually the borders are kind of living things because the people are living in the borders as well. When we take a kind of example in Cyprus, the Tyla is a kind of border in a kind of city and a village, and that actually the people are living there. And also, how can we conceptualize the division on the border, ecological borders, I guess, like the objects. So, I mean, again, I'm trying to do the Tyla case. In Tyla, they try to deleting all the memories or the materials, like street names. So I'm just asking that these kind of deleting memories or erasing the materiality of the villages, which visualize the past memory, is that a kind of correct strategy to be able to avoid the conflict?
We're going to take one last question and then answers, and then there's a panel.
I would like to defend the title, that we are sitting on the divided line. It's not a kind of mental construction. It's good to problematize concepts and notions, but also to understand the materiality of them. We see outside the military patrolling wildfires, and this is a line of data. Every day in the newspapers, in the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots newspapers, there are stories about 74 and the invasion, stories of rapes, of opening graves of victims. So we are not talking about this kind of intellectual divisions that they are going to multiply in a kind of intellectual constructions, but for this material division that exists in Cyprus. And from this point of view, the subtitles from the theory to practice. There is a society here aiming to do work with the two communities, and we are talking, we are discussing, we are thinking in order to be able to somehow to put in a dialogue theory and practice.
Yeah, I mean, the first question was to say something about the debates surrounding the last economic crisis, which is very difficult without immediately entering into a new lecture, which I don't want to do. Perhaps just to say that it's also spatially a many-sided debate, because I think the debate in Germany cannot be understood without the debate in Europe. Because, of course, the criticism of Germany in Europe has been also a very historical. You just have to look at images in the Greek press during the crisis. It constantly refers to the Second World War and the Nazis. So, and of course, that is also very present in Germany. That the reaction to Germany is one that, in a way, constantly refers to the bad past. So there is a kind of perception in Germany often of, on the one hand, Europe looks to Germany to provide leadership and to sort of lead Europe out of economic crisis. On the other hand, it is constantly being confronted with its past. And I think that also creates a lot of negative reaction and partly explains the success of the Alternative für Deutschland, the alternative for Germany, which is the Eurosceptic party, which has in the opinion poll something like 10% of the vote. For the first time that in Germany we have a successful political party that is Eurosceptic, so it's a big change in German political culture, and it sort of harks back to a very traditional national narrative of Germany, disregarding, the fact that Germany in so many ways has benefited from the development of the European Union and is calling again for a kind of national path within Europe. But it's interesting also that there is a kind of historical debate in Germany about the value of the European Union for Germany after 1945, which previously there wasn't. There was just sort of overwhelming consensus on the topic of Europe. Then the 1960s Auschwitz trials, yes, I mean, it's part and parcel of the coming to terms with the past. It was a very important event, but I could have talked easily about just the 1960s and the coming to terms with the past. There's a variety of events. One would have to consider literature, Rolf Hochhuth, der Stellvertreter, Günter Grass, die Blechtrommel. One would have to look at indeed the trials, which were very important, the whole kind of new left in the 1960s and the way to kind of actualize debate about National Socialism as being part of fascism and related to capitalism. So the many facets, and the Auschwitz trials were undoubtedly a very important facet of that coming to terms with the past process.
I asked it because I think it precisely energized the entire 68 generation.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. But there were many other things which energized it too. So it was one important part of that energy that led to the questioning of the 68 generations of their parents. But it's not the only one. And again, the exhibition on the German Wehrmacht is also a very important event in the sense that it was questioning for the first time the idea of a clean Wehrmacht. I referred to the 1950s discourse on the soldiers being the victims of Hitler. The ordinary people who served in the army, who were cannon fodder for an ideology. And the exhibition in a way questioned that, showing how closely ordinary soldiers in the Wehrmacht cooperated with the Einsatzgruppen in the Holocaust, and also, of course, the sheer brutality of warfare on the eastern and southeastern fronts in particular during the Second World War. And of course you then had the debate about the photographs, because some photographs were shown actually not to be of Germans, or so, the whole debate about historical sources and how to treat photography as historical sources, and the agendas that were behind that, which of course were also different political, historical agendas that went into that criticism. So the criticism was not simply a criticism of source criticism, but it had its own kind of perspectives and agendas. So again, one could easily give a whole paper about that topic. But I think both of them are very important for understanding West German historical cultures in the 60s and in the 1990s.
Thank you very much for your questions. I'll try to give a very short answer to Kostis and to use Chris' methodology to skip an answer to your questions. As far as it concerns Kostis' questions, yes, of course, there is no Radegusta Arabica. There is not an origin for the Radegusta Arabica. Aris Veloukiotis was not the first who coined the term. And I think that this is exactly the case why Radegusta Arabica became a viral, vocal part of contemporary Greek historical culture. Because
sorry, explain the meaning of Radegusta Arabica for yes.
When Veloukiotis used rendezvous, if Veloukiotis used something like rendezvous στα Arabica, he said, as Kostis said, Kali Adamos στα Arabica, it was something a little bit different. He had to mind
to the slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse.
We are going to something like Leonidas in this film, the 300. Let's today we'll die in hell. This is the English translation. This is the meaning, and I think that he took this catchphrase from the Ottoman past for some during the 19th century, some parts of Greek resistance from these mythologies. This is what I could say about Radegusta Arabica. It's a very effective viral piece of unit because of the lack of originality. Now it comes to your very difficult questions. I'm afraid that I have not an answer to each one of these questions. During the last years, I'm conducting research concerning the most of your questions. I'm trying to understand what makes something viral and what does not. I'm trying to understand historical typology of virality. First of all, as a historian, I'm trying to understand the historicity of contemporary virality. So the only answer I could give you is the sketch of the subtitles in the book I'm writing now. I have 4 chapters. One is affect. The second one is the strategies of erasing genealogy. The third one is speed and the past, speeding the past. And the fourth one is the Althusserian concept of underdetermination.
Will it be in English or
no, in Greek.
If it goes viral, I'm through.
Well, in case Antonius' intervention was somehow addressed to me, I want to defend myself, of course. I want to argue that nothing what I have said was meant to deny the materiality of divisions like these, or in Korea, or whatever. The only thing I wanted to highlight by mentioning the importance of the mode of representation in, as to divisions and harmony, etc., was that the frame that is used is co-determining the picture. I mean, in the case of the Dutch master narrative, I mean, I have highlighted that what was actually, with hindsight, so important or so remarkable is that Dutch historians and social scientists succeeded in leaving imperial violence, colonial violence completely out of the picture. But also domestic violence. I mean, what I tried to emphasize is the importance of the frame of representation and the focus of the representation, and that well, depending on the frame and the focus, you get completely different pictures, and therefore you can also produce harmonious representations of conflicted societies, and the other way around. That, I mean, I'm the last who would suggest that there is no real or material basis to these things.
Thank you very much. So for all papers.